Here everyone, welcome back to Tech Engineering Lounge. This is episode number 6 and we're talking about how to retain engineering talent in an organization today. I'm Camy, your usual host, and I've got James SB with us, our co-host, and today we are joined by our special friend, Aaron. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. We're just going to do a roundtable conversation around how can organizations retain their engineering talent. And I thought we could actually start with talking about why do people leave, like, in the first place? Like, we could just kind of like kick off the conversation with why do people leave, and then kind of like come back to how can organizations keep them there. James. Sorry to throw you under the bus, but yeah.
No, it's not under the bus. You've thrown me onto a pedestal. I will just my camera froze while you were doing introductions, so if it seemed like I was being rude, I was just frozen. So why do people leave? I mean, there's lots of reasons people leave organizations, and it comes down to personal values and what we're looking for. I think if you were looking for my own stories, one of the phrases you'll hear bandied about is that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Yes.
I don't think that's always true. I think that it's more nuanced than that, but I think that's definitely, it's a reason I've left jobs before, is that, I worked for a manager who was a bad person, and, that was a clear indicator to me.
Person or a bad manager,
or both?
I mean, both. Yes,
right.
I think
Yeah.
His being a bad person fed into him being a bad manager. What I mean by that is that he would make decisions that were in the interests of the person rather than the team. I don't probably want to go into specifics of what those were, but things that were clearly, I felt like I was working for someone than working with someone. And it felt like he was a person that didn't have my best interests at heart. And, I felt like I was in a team where I could be out any given day. I didn't feel like I could give candid feedback on what we were working on because of the way the manager would react. I didn't feel like I had a choice in what I was doing, that sort of thing. So a little bit of a vague answer, but definitely a manager who doesn't look after his team is one reason that I think people leave.
Yes, definitely. And there are so many articles, like if you just go online, I'm pretty sure that's like the number one reason. And there are so many memes on LinkedIn, like for exactly what you said, that you don't leave the company, you're actually leaving a bad manager, right? It's like Yeah. Aaron, what's your take on it?
Yeah, and it sounds like there are a couple of things there. One was like the lack of, first that sort of uncertainty where it's like, you don't know if you're going to be in or out at any time, so I guess you may as well make it on your own terms. And also that, I guess, that lack of autonomy, right? Feeling like, I can't decide what I want to do, as my manager. I'm just thinking back to okay, I guess the first tech job that I resigned from, so it was actually different to that. So I'll maybe come back to that. And it was so this one was, my first tech job was, absolutely fantastic. And it's sort of where I learned, testing and all that kind of stuff. But then it got to a point where you kind of hit that sort of ceiling in an organization where there's sort of no room left to grow. You've kind of, leveled up. You've kind of, 100%ed that org. Unlocked all the achievements. And then it's a case of, if I want to grow, I need to sort of, swim to a different pond kind of thing. And so that's where, in that org, that's the reason I left that first one. Then funnily enough, the second place I went to working on a really cool product. It was amazing. Yet I only stayed there 2 years. And there, I think it was similar, James, not because I had a bad manager, but because this was actually to do with, so this was a product, for all intents and purposes, imagine a product company. But it got to a point where the product wasn't growing anymore. And I guess the company's vision for the product didn't sort of match my own ambitions for it. And, you'd see yourself and the developers I was working with could, see like all the amazing things we could do with this product, but the company itself was kind of content with what it had and just continuing on business as usual. And so then it was a case of, okay, I need to sort of move on because my interests don't align with business as usual. It's like, no, I'm here to grow something. I'm here to, if I want to achieve something and I'm not achieving it, then it's like, I can't stay. It's sort of, not worth my time, I guess.
Yeah, you've got to have that sort of, it's not engaging, right? And some people don't want that. Some people are quite happy to do a sort of a business as usual, chugging away at the day-to-day stuff, and some people are not. And want something that's, where you're going to, like I'm quite similar. I think I really like, to grow a product and to see, new features and implementations and see customer base thrive and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing for me. The first couple of jobs that I left, obviously a lot of people are underpaid, and I think there was kind of like, companies, when you do not have proper yearly reviews, you do not have proper performance reviews, and you are at the same salary for years, or even if you get a rise, it's just like pretty bare, minimal or nothing. Like in a lot of cases, it doesn't even matches the yearly inflation rate, right? Like that's shocking, but that still happens. And I think, the first couple of jobs that I did leave was for that reason. And I think, again, that goes back to like the fact that I'm not being valued at this organization. For me, that was it. But like later in my career, I think it has mostly been for the same reasons, like I don't align with the company values or the culture. And in a lot of cases, it's the leadership, like the values that they stand for, that doesn't align with me, or it doesn't feel authentic. Like it's nice to, like, for me, the thing is everyone wants to be a leader. Like I see around people and everyone wants to be a leader. But I think out of the 50% of employees that want to move into leadership roles or are in leadership roles, only 2% of them are actually like really good, authentic leaders. And I would rather work with that 2%. Rather than, like working for the remaining 48% that kind of like aren't quite authentic. They just like do the talk, but don't walk the talk.
Yeah, and often the leaders get promoted on their technical ability. So you'll have a great programmer. So I worked at a place, and someone who was a rock star programmer got promoted to tech lead, and was a terrible lead. Maybe that's too strong a word. But I remember, and you talk about ineffective annual reviews, and I was having a review with him, and you sort of rate yourself as meeting expectations, not meeting, exceeding expectations, and he said that I was meeting expectations, and I was feeling like I actually feel like I'm exceeding expectations, and I gave these reasons, and he said, yes, I agree, but I expected you to exceed expectations. Therefore, you're meeting my expectations. And so I think that sort of illustrates 2 points you made. One is ineffective annual reviews. The second is promoting the wrong people into kind of leadership roles.
Exactly. Like people in leadership roles are in the business of growing people. Like pretty much all leadership, including technical leadership, you are responsible for growing people around you. And it's shocking how many people miss that point. And I think that is one of the reasons where you have ineffective leaders, right? Then it becomes like more of an ego-driven leadership model rather than a servant leadership where you actually want to grow people around you.
Yeah, I think something that possibly feeds into that is that idea that a career path only leads to leadership.
Yeah.
I think we're getting away from that more and more. But, I've seen it in testing especially, where you go from junior to intermediate to senior to lead. And that's the path. And you don't sort of, I feel like more and more people are talking about actually there's lots of IC tracks that are not leads that can lead you to, being a contributor in different ways, but it's not, it's still a thing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's something we actually just started working on at Datacom in our team, because, again, we sort of have that traditional, like you said, sort of, you get to senior, and then the only way up is sort of, to become a test lead and a test manager, and then, maybe some kind of people lead or a practice lead. And I remember, in my career, and that's the other thing. If we're just talking about career paths, one thing that's also broken, right, is that you typically start off as a test analyst, and then after you've been there a couple of years, you've been doing it a couple of years, then the next step is senior test analyst, and it's kind of like. So then you get this problem where you get people who are senior test analysts and they've been senior TAs for like 10 years. You get people who have maybe been there 2 years, and it's like, cool, they're really doing well, they absolutely deserve it, and they become a senior TA as well. And so basically you get the situation where everyone's a senior TA, because it's sort of where you sit if you've been here between sort of 2 and 10 years, is there's nowhere else to kind of be unless you want to be a test lead or a test manager. And I found myself in that situation where, I've been a senior TA. I'd been a senior TA had that job title, maybe 9 years. And it starts to feel like there's no kind of growth, right? You've always got the same job title. You're doing the same job.
So,
and of course I didn't have much interest in becoming a test manager because, getting into, working for a consultancy, test manager typically means, going in, dealing with politics of a project, dealing with stakeholders, that kind of thing. And those weren't my strengths. So, at the risk of going off on a tangent, that's where we sort of, at BNZ, I was on engagement there being a test coach, which was an absolutely fantastic role. I'll just park that for the moment. Going back to career paths.
They got rid of those roles. They got rid of those roles.
Yes, they did, yeah. Anyway, going back to what we're doing now at Datacom is we actually proposed first of all, we're not calling it a career ladder, we're calling it a career wall. So the analogy isn't so much that you've got one ladder that you're climbing, but rather you've got a climbing wall that you can then kind of move around and move across, and right, so you're not stuck on one path. And so we've got you can kind of think of it as there being two tracks. We've got an engineering and an analysis kind of path, but you can move between them. And then when you get to that senior test analyst level, then you've got a choice, right? You can go and go, yep, I want to become a test lead and a test manager because I really like, managing testers, and I like stakeholder engagement, and I like, the politics and the reporting and all that goes on. Or it can be like, no, I love being a tester. I want to grow my, say in the engineering path, I absolutely love, maybe you've decided to specialize in performance. It's like, no, performance is my thing, and I want to know everything about performance, and all this politics stuff doesn't interest me. So we've got this test specialist role, this idea that we then acknowledge you've got like a deep pool of knowledge in a certain area and can now advise and all that kind of stuff. On the analysis side, we've got the equivalent, which is a test consultant. You can go on and do consulting, but you don't need to become then a people manager. You don't need to deal with people or politics, or because that's a whole other skill, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's one of the reasons, because to be able to deal with to be able to responsible for people management, you need an incredible amount of self-awareness, which most of us lack, unless you're actually constantly thinking and you're being aware of yourself. It's just it has to be you have to constantly work on yourself, what you're saying, introspecting, can you improve, which no one has time for that, right? I mean, unless you're really into it, really into personal development and all of that sort of stuff.
Well, yeah, it's it's like the arguments for every developer should be testers, or every tester should be able to do automation and do this stuff and this stuff. It's like, well, if you want people to do things well, they need to be focused on things, right? So so similarly, if you want someone to be a lead, then now they need to focus on that, and they need to grow and learn. It's a whole brand new set of skills that you now need to learn. And you might have been a senior programmer, you might have been a senior test analyst, but now you're a junior manager.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is actually a really good point, Aaron, that you brought it up, because it was on my list. One of the reasons why people do leave is because majority of the organizations do not have well-defined career pathways in the technical and the non-technical realm. The usual corporate ladder is pretty much like exactly what you said, Aaron. You reach the senior level, and then all you move is like you become an engineering lead or a test lead or a dev lead, which a lot of people are not interested. I mean, that is one of the primary reasons why I moved to consulting or contracting, because I'm like, I don't want to move into those roles. I tried it, I didn't enjoy it, and I want to keep on honing my technical skills. So I was left with no choice, because also the salaries are capped, at least in New Zealand, in majority of the organization. Like the senior test analysts, the senior developers, like the salaries are capped. And if you want a rise, you have to now become an engineering lead or an engineering manager. But I don't want that. Like they lack that well-defined career pathway for technical roles. So they leave no choice, either like people have to leave, or they are forced into like leadership roles that they don't really want to move into.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing we've done is, when I say that we've done, this is what we're proposing, and we've gone and we've gone and got feedback from people. Like, so we ran workshops and got feedback from people. So it's not something we've implemented yet, but this is what we're in the process of implementing. And another thing that we're experimenting with the idea of is sort of having these specializations. So, specializations might be things like performance, security, business analysis, product management, that kind of thing. And the idea is, if you're like a senior and you're content being a senior, then you can continue to kind of grow sort of laterally. So you can go, actually, you know what? And so for this year, when you're talking about people's career plans or career growth, it's like, cool, you're absolutely content where you are, and that's awesome. Let's look at one of these specializations and then see if we can get some deeper knowledge in there. And it also means that then you can, in terms of salary, say, it's not necessarily tied to, oh, well, you're a senior, so you only earn this much. It's like a case of, cool, but look, you've grown in this area, and you're now, sort of like an expert when it comes to performance, or you're an expert when it comes to running workshops or that kind of thing. And so you still get that growth, but it's not tied to a job title necessarily if you don't want it.
Yep.
I really like this idea that you need to be able to see where you can go. I think that's a key element of retention, is being able to see what the career options are for you, and
having it visualized.
Having it visualized. I think what's helpful for me, at least, is also seeing other people doing those jobs, and having kind of a here's someone at the level I want to get to. How do I get to be like them? I don't know if I want to use the phrase role model, but like someone setting the template, I guess.
Like one of the things that I currently struggle with is, so for me, like majority of my expertise is on mobile test automation, and I've done it for more than a decade, and then I started doing APIs, and after a couple of years of doing that, I'm kind of like, I don't want to move into leadership roles, but I want to keep growing into technical roles. But I don't want to leave testing either, because I really enjoy building test automation from ground up, like doing the heavy lifting. I really enjoy doing that stuff. I don't want to move into like a cloud engineer role or a technical specialist role. So what are my options? So for me, the most challenging role, while still being a tester, was becoming a full stack tester, where I do. So right now at BNZ, like I'm a full stack tester, and I test mobile applications, web, and APIs, and I build automation for all four of them. And it's kind of like I mean, not to kind of like brag about myself, but it's kind of like multiple, like so many languages that I'm kind of like switching between, and I'm switching between Swift, Kotlin, JavaScript, and I'm like so much stuff to work with, but it's just like the salaries are still same. So like someone who only works on mobile doesn't know anything about web and APIs, or someone who only does web doesn't have any cross-platform skills. For me, that seems a bit unfair. So ideally a full stack tester should probably be paid more than, and there will be a good career pathway, So like if you only know mobile, but if you want to grow and you want to get paid more, you can build the skill, and like then you can build up that skill to become a full stack tester where you can kind of like do automation. And I think that's a good career pathway, or at least I would like to get paid more than like people who doesn't have cross-platform skills. But that's just my opinion, though. That's just my opinion.
I mean, you're a contractor, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you set your own rate?
No,
Is that how it works? No. Okay.
No. Yeah, but it's like the rates are set by the company. But it's the same thing for people in permanent roles as well. Like full stack testers or full stack developers do not get paid more than like people like who just know like one platform. So like a full stack developer would not get paid more than like a mobile developer or a web developer, an API developer. But yeah, which I think is unfair. Like if people are spending so much time developing technical skills, they should be valued for their expertise. It's a strong opinion.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, and I only pause because it's a lot to consider, right?
Yes.
And there's this whole so there's two things that you brought up that I wanted to explore, and I can't remember what the other one was because now we're on sort of like this remuneration thing. Oh yes. So one thing, and I want to come back to it, is feeling the need to leave testing in order to grow.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that. So yeah. One thing that always frustrated me, and it's quite complicated, so you might need to bear with me while I make the point, is, how do I put it? Okay, so it is complicated because, I'll start and then I'll refine it.
Yes.
So the fact that test engineers get paid more than, say, test analysts. So basically, for the purposes of this discussion, let's just say test engineers are people who can automate stuff, and test analysts are people who either can't or are focusing elsewhere and are doing other kinds of testing. What some people might call manual testing, what James Bark might call experiential testing, but hands-on testing with a product. Now, often there's a good reason for that, and that is that, oh gosh, this is really a can of worms, is that, so, and it does come down to career growth and what people know, so let's see if we can tie this all up. I guess one problem with testing is that it can be seen as, I don't blame people for walking into a room full of testers, and you've got a room full of, say, 15 testers, and you see them writing test scripts, and then for a couple of months, and then they execute those test scripts for a couple of months, and then they report pass-fail statistics for a couple of months. And of course, the question you've got to ask yourself is, well, can't we automate that? And the answer is, yeah, of course we can. Well, cool. Let's replace those 15 testers with maybe 3 or 4 engineers who can automate that. And then you kind of go, well, look at all this money that we've saved, and we should pay them accordingly. Because what those other people were doing was low skill, and then what these other people are doing is high skill. So yeah, cool, it kind of makes sense. So on the back of that, then you've got this issue where we now use these words manual testing and automated testing to describe that kind of testing. So now, but there's a group of people that then have another view of testing, and I'm obviously preaching to the choir here, but we're talking about skill testing that can come in, find things that threaten the value of the product, and can do it quickly and cheaply, and can add value. Learn your product, learn what matters, find bugs, report bugs, and really add value to a product. Problem is, what they do looks like the same thing that those other testers were doing. They're sitting down at a computer, they're typing away, they're doing quote unquote manual testing, and they don't get the same value. And now it's almost we've come kind of not full circle, but we now have teams of automators who are sitting there for 3 months writing automation. The difference is instead of using English, they're using Java. And then they're running, and then they're executing these tests, and you end up with, maybe hundreds of tests or thousands of tests sometimes that are unmaintainable, don't really tell you much, and really don't add much value. Getting paid more than your quote-unquote manual tester who is in there, get their hands on the product, experience it, learn it, find threats to value, and report on them. And so that's what I'm struggling with at the moment, is trying to fight for the value of skilled testers to be on par with now the test engineers. And it's like, and it gets hard when it comes to skill, because the difference is that for a test engineer, same with programmers, right? The skill floor, so your barrier to entry is higher. So in order for me to come in and write automation, I need to learn a computer programming language. And that's, I can't just walk in and do that. I need to learn and dedicate that. I need to learn about stuff. Anyone can sit down at a computer and kind of find a bug, right? So the floor is kind of lower. However, we've now we've kind of conflated the floor with the ceiling. It's like, if I'll just use the word manual testing. I really hate it, but if we look at manual testing, the floor is low. Anyone can come in and kind of start manually testing something. And yet we've kind of conflated that with then therefore it's lower skilled without looking at the skill ceiling. And then I'd argue that the skill ceiling is just as high. It absolutely can be. And so now fighting for that pay parity can be really difficult, because it's like, well, but they can do automation is the argument I get back. They can do automation, and so one of my frustrations is that really, really great test analysts feel the pressure and the need to become test automators in order to grow their career and get paid more. And so we end up kind of with this brain drain of really amazing testers who, not because they want to, it's their passion. I'm not talking about that. And don't get me wrong, coding skills is an important skill for anyone to have. I'm not, but this idea though that, well, they need to stop doing something that they love and are good at, and now need to start writing test automation scripts all day in order to get paid more, is really frustrating. And I think a lot of, and so what I'm seeing is a lot of test analysts going, well, I either need to become an automator, or maybe I need to switch careers and become a BA or something, because that's my passion. And I know that, or maybe become a product owner. This idea that your career path, once you hit a certain point, is to go into automation or go outside of testing, is a phenomenon I'm seeing, and it really breaks my heart. It's like, oh my God, for two reasons. One, because of the people themselves. Secondly, because of the craft of testing and how, if we're wanting to elevate testing and show people how it can really add value, I need people with me to fight this fight, right? But it's really hard. And of course, as a career coach, what am I going to say to people? It's like, I'm in a really privileged position, right? I can't say to someone, hand on heart, it's like, no, you shouldn't do something you don't love, because that's bad for the industry and it's bad for your integrity when they can get paid more and they've got families and all that, So I realize I'm getting a bit off topic, so I'll just stop for the moment.
Well, if I can kind of, that does tie in a bit, I think, because I've been in this situation where I've felt like, or I've met people in this situation as well. I felt like I must learn automation because if I want to be relevant in this industry, if I want my next job, if I get laid off tomorrow, that's what I'm going to need to make sure I'm employable. That's a thing. And then I have talked to people as recently as the last 2 months who have said, well, I've taken this job. They promised me automation. That's not what I'm doing. So I'm going to leave. Yes. And that becomes a huge retention problem because you're not following through on what, you promised people would do, when actually potentially what they're doing is more valuable anyway.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting phenomenon. I've seen that too. And similarly, where we have engineers that go in and say, we're not doing engineering, or I have people saying, I don't want to do manual testing, I just want to do automation. And there's a lot to unpack there, because
there is.
my first my first instinct is, well, if you're an automation tester, you should be testing, right? Blah, blah, blah. But what they might really be saying is, I thought I'd be doing high value work and I'm not doing high value work, which might be true too. It might be that when they say manual testing, they mean maybe they're writing and executing test scripts or whatever. And I think the problem is that, our language isn't, gosh, there's too much to unpack there, and probably not on topic. So I won't, as tempting as it is.
We'll have to have you back, Aaron. This is quite interesting.
But maybe there is something to unpack there in terms of role expectation, and what it is that you're doing. So I think maybe it comes back down to autonomy, right? So it comes down to someone telling you what you need to do. So when someone says, I thought I'd be doing automation, but I'm not, it's like, well, okay, so why aren't you? Oh, because someone has told you something else, right? Similarly, like I know, so, I'm my idea of testing is getting hands-on with a product, learning about it, investigating, reporting on problems that matter. Someone else's idea of testing might be take requirements documents and write scripts that validate whether certain requirements have been met or not. And the problem is we both use the same word to describe that, testing. And so someone says to me, hey, Aaron, I want you to come in and do some testing. We're hiring a tester, come and be our tester. Well, that could mean anything. It could be anything from, we want you to come in and we want you to sit down and write test scripts for 3 months, through to my idea of testing, which is getting hands-on with the product, working with the development team, finding threats to value, and helping the developers and our team look as good as possible so we can deliver a product that adds value, right, in a responsible way. Similarly, I think even using the word automation means different things. Like you could say, we want someone to come in and do test automation. And it's like, oh, cool. Maybe in your mind, it's like, oh, great, now this isn't my area of expertise, but, it's like, cool. So there you're imagining sitting there with the console open, writing code in order to create a framework that interacts directly with the API, and it comes back and you've got a reporting thing. It's like, oh, really exciting. And it's like, cool. So here's Selenium, and here are our scripts. Can you just edit what we've got or copy and paste,
Well, can you run them? Can you run them and tell us if they're green,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I know I struggle with that a lot in terms of being someone who, say, clients interact with, saying we need someone to come in and do X, Y, and Z, and trying to match that with people, because they go, oh no, it's all automation. It's like, well, okay, or it's API automation, and you've got an idea in your head. Oh, okay, so they're using Postman, maybe they're using collections. Yeah, you got that idea, and then actually you go in and it's, oh no, it's not. They're actually using like a rest assured, and it's all in Java.
It's like more technical. You did raise a really good point there, though. So like for people who are forced to learn automation or other skills, and they just can't leave because they have, children to feed at home, like the financial situation, like they have to stay, they have mortgages to pay. It kind of like, if the company doesn't have a good program to support you in your upskilling, that can hurt, and that can lead up to building a lot of resentment. So majority of the organizations say that they provide like maybe 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours every week of like personal development time to all the employees. But there is no formal way of making utilization of those 2 hours every week. And pretty much everyone just ends up kind of like doing whatever their sprint work is. Or if it's worse if you work at a startup or a scale up, because shit's always on fire and you just get dragged into all of that stuff. Like I've been in both the situations where those 2 hours is just like, unless I'm like super disciplined and I just kind of like switch off like all of my communication channels and I go on Udemy and I'm doing my course, that's the only way. I think a better way of doing it would be if the company had some sessions, like if there were workshops, hands-on workshops, there were being organized by the organizations, especially when it comes to like technical hands-on skills in the engineering area, right? It's like automation experience. Like we ask all of these manual testers to learn automation, and some of them are really, really keen to learn, but there is no support. So they are pretty much like left by themselves to kind of like do it in their private time, which is really, really hard if you have children and if you have other engagements outside work. Yeah.
Absolutely. So going back to that test coach role. So yeah, when I was a test coach at BNZ and they had the test coaches there, it was actually fantastic because we did run a course where everyone learnt Java. So it was classroom based, and everyone had their laptops and stuff. Where there was like a formal course that we ran, teaching people, so the basics of Java, then how to apply that to to an automation framework and how all that all works, and it was absolutely fantastic. And similarly, the test coach role, you'd go into teams and then work with testers about what their current, issues are, and then how you might be able to help them and point them to training and that kind of thing. Going back to what we're doing at Datacom is we're building up sort of these bodies of knowledge. So the idea being that if you want to, and creating these learning pathways, right? So if you want to learn about, say, mobile testing, for example, there's either a place you can go and we've got all these resources, like here are articles and videos and courses, but also like this pathway in terms of, okay, so step one, read these articles, then think about it, blah, blah, blah. Then there's an activity, right? And then you go and talk with someone. Because you need, it's one thing to say to someone, you need to learn blah, but where do you start? And how do you make sure that you don't end up going down the wrong path and learning bad stuff? Because 90% of the, you Google something and 90% of it is rubbish anyway. Like Google something that you know about, and say, hey, how do I learn about? And then something that you really know about, and then be horrified when you read about what people are asking you to learn.
Yeah. I would take a slightly different angle on the improvement, the personal growth stuff. I like the idea. I think Google call it 20% time, like 20% of your week is personal development.
Yep.
Which is great. And I think do it if you can do it. And we have, Fergus, we have things like Jog Day that people are experimenting with. We have a day of sprint where everyone's just doing something else. But if I'm trying to coach someone to learn a new thing, I want to learn automation. Okay. The way I would approach it is, well, here's an automation task that we need doing. That's going on your Jira board, and that's going to be part of your sprint this week. And then it's not separate from the workload, and it has practical application, and there's a little bit of risk to it. It has to work. There's something on the line.
Yeah, it's an authentic problem.
Yeah.
I know, like myself, way back, I want to learn SQL for the longest time, and I bought a book and I was trying to learn SQL, and the book was saying, you create a database. It's like it's a toy shop, and here's a teddy bear, and it really never clicked until I was in a role where I had to use it, and then it was like, and then the case was, is this the big deal? Oh, okay. Like suddenly, when it was an authentic problem, then you learn it.
And that actually goes back to kind of like an employee sitting down with their manager and clearly defining like what are the employee's expectations or what are their growth areas, and then the manager guiding or finding opportunities for the employee to be able to grow in those areas, right? Like for me, that's what our one-on-ones should be all about. Like it's like if I'm not growing at a company, then I'm gonna leave. Like why would I stay? And in a lot of cases, like over time you build so much resentment, like it kind of like it starts impacting your mental health, and it's not worth bringing all of that stress home, because like day in day out you're doing the same stuff, and it's like resentment is like the silent killer of your soul. That's how I think. So I'm kind of like never stay in a situation, whether it's a job, a relationship, or a house, or a shitty neighborhood, where you're just like building resentment over time. Like pull yourself out of it. Yeah.
Yep. I'm interested in that. I'm glad you said that you wouldn't stay in a job where you're not growing. Camy, because you also talked, probably in the first 10 minutes, you talked about leaving jobs because of salary. And I'm interested in salary as a motivator. And where that, like, say, I'm probably contriving situations here, but which one's more important? You're in a job where you're growing, but the salary's not so great, or there's a job where the salary is going to be great, but you're not going to get that growth. How do you balance up those things? And then how, if we're talking about retention, which one's more important? If you've only got so much to play with, do you focus on growth plans for your team, or you just throw more money at them?
Yeah, and it's quite an interesting one. Like, of course, money is one of the reasons why I moved into contracting, because I pretty much reached the cap of the maximum I can be paid as a senior test engineer, and I want to pay off my mortgage. So it was like I was left with no choice. But I think I've been lucky, even with my contracting roles. And I think this kind of like happens when you reach a certain stage in your career, you have decent experience. You can even choose with your contracting roles as well. Like, I would probably not contract anywhere. I've been lucky to have like 2 contracts with BNZ so far, which has been amazing. And BNZ is an amazing place to work at. And for me, that's kind of like the best situation ever. Like, I have grown so much, and at the same time, I'm also contracting for the bank, which is great. And I would probably, if I was to leave BNZ, I would choose a similar situation. And I mean, permanent salaries are pretty good as well, like across the board. I think it kind of like sucks when companies do not have a proper performance review or annual review, or if the managers are not onto it. That's when it sucks. And I think that's when like people are stuck at the same salaries, which are like below market, like for years. And I think this is where like feedback, like I think one of the things that I wanted to bring up as part of this conversation was the importance of having 360 feedback or yearly feedbacks and your performance reviews. And depending on that, you kind of like getting a salary rise. I mean, the salary raise is not dependent quite on that. Like the salary raise should happen regardless. Like if the interest rates are going up, inflation is happening, we should get a rise as well. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on these topics.
Yeah,
I'll let Aaron go first.
I mean, it really sucks when basically your remuneration is based on how well you can represent yourself, and you can, what's the word? Like I know that, when I've gone for pay reviews, like, because I'm able to articulate the value that I bring, and because I guess I'm, what's the word? Words escape me. The assertive enough to then go back and negotiate.
Yes.
Then I have gotten pay rises that other people might not have, who have just accepted the pay rate that they've been given. So that sucks, that really how well you're paid often isn't correlated with how well you do your job, but how well you can sort of negotiate. It also sucks when the problem with testing, say, is that a lot of what we do is invisible, right? There's no sort of tangible outcome. You can't point to a product and go, I built that. How do you kind of value those little interactions you have every day with developers and say, hey, I've noticed this and I think this is a problem because of X, Y, Z. And, how do you compare one tester with another and go, this tester is $5,000 better than this tester?
Yeah, that absolutely sucks, sorry to barge in, but the majority of the times I've been permanent employee, the way I understand is that every time we'll get like a pool of money, let's say $30,000 is like the total bonus that can be distributed across the time. Now, which means we are all, like my entire team is competing, like we are all competing against each other. And it's awful. It's just like, so like how do you decide? Like I might have excelled in my role. And I might have met all of my yearly expectations that were set out in my performance review. But like, it's just like, for me, that does not sound like a great model of kind of like showing people like the value for their effort. And this is why I think like the performance-based bonus. Like I don't like it. Doesn't I don't buy into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and similarly, so I work in professional services, and so let's say I work, I'm a consultant, and I'm off on, so let's say I'm a consultant at the beginning of the year. Sort of my boss has said, hey, this year you're going, or you've got an engagement at this client. I turn up at that client, and I'm doing my job, and it's not really glamorous, but it's the job that I was given to do, and that's all fine. And then someone else goes to another client, and it's all on fire, and everything's terrible, and so through after a couple of months of them being there, they're able to turn the ship around and At the end of the year, it's like, well, it sort of seems obvious that the person who went on that other client where it was all on fire, they turned it around, should get a raise, and me, who was sitting there sort of holding the fort, doing the BAU kind of stuff, maybe not so much, because when you look at the outcomes, and that's, but yet when you look at the circumstances, they were all sort of out of both people's control. It was someone else who decided where they went. It was luck of the draw. Is that fair? And that's a rhetorical question. I
mean, it is one of the other compelling reasons, apart from the fact that I don't want to move into management roles. I moved to consulting or contracting. It's just like, I don't want to be part of like a culture where I'm competing and like my effort is being compared relatively to someone else's effort, and it's like totally two different situations. Like I just don't want to be part of like that culture. Something that I'm really keen to bring up, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, because I just heard of it recently, is retention bonuses. Retention bonuses, from what I've heard, it usually happens at the executive level or the senior leadership level. And when I first heard of it, it was kind of like an instant turn off, and I was pissed off a bit. So I was like,
so you talk about managers getting bonuses based on how many people they've retained.
No, I think it's just like you get bonus so that you stay. I don't understand it. Like from what someone was explaining it to me.
So you stay at a company a certain time, you get a bonus?
Yeah, just like retention bonuses, or like you get a rise and then you stay back. Like it's like from what I was hearing, someone was telling me a story, and this was mostly like for the senior leaders at that organization. Like they were like, it's kind of like second hand information, but it was kind of like very interesting. I was just like, does that actually happen? Because that sounds unfair. Like if the executive team, the leadership team gets retention bonuses, but like normal working class engineers, we don't. Maybe.
It would be unfair if it wasn't for everyone.
Yeah.
In terms of it as a concept, is it fair? But you've been here longer. I mean.
Yeah.
James, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I'd want to know more. I definitely have heard of this idea that, managers will have, your target is 80% retention. Yeah. And if you meet that target, you get a bonus. Usually, no, I can't say usually. When I've been in that situation, the ICs in the team had other ways of getting bonuses. Yes. So, as an example, the ops team had a bonus if they retained 99% uptime, that sort of thing. So there's a bonus scheme across the board if you were doing your job. And that seems okay to me.
I was keen, like, I think there are several definitions of retention bonuses, because what you've described is one. What I heard from someone is the other, which sounded a bit dodgy. I would be interested, like, if our listeners know, like, whatever definition applies to you, just put it down in the comments. Like, I'm really keen to kind of, like, understand, like, what does retention bonuses mean? But I feel like we should all, like, the salaries should increase every year, at least to match the inflation, right? It just sounds a bit depressing that, like, we don't get any rise because, COVID hit. I mean, I understand, but people were still buying houses, like people are still getting mortgages. It's a controversial topic to talk about. Yeah, it is, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not my area of expertise. It's sort of above sort of my level. But having moved into a management role and seeing the other side, it's like it is more complicated than that, because inflation applies to everyone, because it also means the business's expenses have increased as well.
Yeah.
And also inflation. Oh, look, this really isn't. I really don't know much about it, but someone explained it to me. But went along the lines of, though, if inflation's at 7%, it doesn't mean everything is now 7% more expensive, and it doesn't mean that a 7% pay rise. Like, it just sort of doesn't work that way. But look, I mean, I agree, right? That if inflation is rising and you're not getting a pay rise, or your pay rise is less than inflation or thereabouts, then sure, you are sort of losing ground.
Yep.
But actually, it's more nuanced than that. But I don't know enough about it to be able to talk about it.
But also I think it's always like the very senior executive leadership, the board of directors, that usually get to make these decisions, right? Like middle managers, people we report to, or people who they report to, they don't get to make any decisions of pretty sure like it comes from like very up top, and then it's just like passed down to all of us.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a middle manager, and I get to at least be part of that decision.
Oh, nice one, James. Fergus is a good nice one.
And I do too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Then I'm just making. Ignore me. I'm just making shit up.
It's not always. It's not always easy.
I don't know if the way it works here, and then James, you can say how it works at your end. Is we come up with a sort of a proposal for people's pay rises, and then it goes up, and then sort of it goes up the chain, and then there's sort of budget and it gets allocated, and then there's sort of mediation, and then sort of people compare across, making sure that there's parity and all that kind of stuff, and then it sort of comes back down, and they might say yes or no, or it should be this much. Actually, parity, I want to touch on that. James, you want to say how it is at yours, and then maybe we can come back to parity?
Oh, it's a very similar story. You put a proposal up.
Yeah.
One thing for me is sort of making sure that proposal includes salary bands in other organisations, what a person is getting paid now, what they should be getting, or what you want their new salary to be, and what will happen if we don't do this. Because I think is an important call out. Is this is this $10,000 pay rise will cost us if we don't do it, potentially, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I mean, look, I agree, but then sort of do you get into a situation where, so I guess here's kind of the emergent things that happen, right? Is that, so coming back to parity, is that people sort of say that the general advice is that if you want a pay rise, you need to leave your organization. The only way to get a pay rise is to get a new job. So then there's the parity in terms of making sure that our existing employees are that new employees aren't getting paid more than existing employees, like all things being equal. So there's all that, but then do you get the situation where, and it comes back to the points that I made earlier, where unless someone, you talk about, well, if we don't give a person this raise, then they might leave. Do we then get a situation where, I guess there's two things. One, people who can afford to leave and who have options end up in a more privileged position because they can get a pay rise, versus someone who can't afford to leave because maybe it's their only job and all that kind of stuff. They really are tied to the company.
Yes.
I really worry about that situation where people who have more to lose. The irony is the people who have more to lose end up losing the most.
Yes. Yep. Totally.
Yeah. Sorry, I muted myself because there's all the neighbour's got the bandsaw out, so I'll doing that.
It's like you hear about the advice of if a company has these values, when you go and do a job interview, you're interviewing them as much as they are you, and if your values don't align with them, then you should turn down the job. It's like, that's all great for some people, but not everyone can afford to take that advice.
Yeah. Yep.
And so so I know like one thing, now that, sort of I'm a manager, is like, oh gosh, it's like being mindful of the case of, X is, they're at real risk of leaving because, they're not getting paid the same. But that's like, well, just because someone's not at risk of leaving doesn't mean that we then can just ignore them. And no, that's not what you're saying, James, at all.
Yeah.
It was just that when you mentioned it, it sort of brought up this phenomenon of actually, there's this phenomenon where then people who are more dependent on you as an employer can get taken advantage of, I guess.
Yeah. The other thing I like to consider is that people will talk to each other about their salaries.
Always.
So parity needs to be considered.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I think this is where the entire conversation around salary transparency comes in, because a lot of companies nowadays have their salaries on their website or their internal website. Like if you're a senior developer, this is your band. Like they're very transparent about it. And from what I've heard, a lot of companies are actually quite very clear about, like, if you're a senior test engineer, this is how much you make. If you're a CEO, this is how much you make. Again, I don't 100% wholeheartedly agree with the entire salary transparency conversation, but I think we should have another segment on it, because it's a pretty hot topic. Like I hear about it all the time, and it's like both good and bad. I am keen, because we are approaching almost an hour mark. But what a fascinating conversation, though, Aaron. Like, you were the perfect person to have this conversation with. I think one of the reasons why people also leave is because the technical stack that they're working on is too old. And I think this is like mostly for developers and like more technical roles. It's just too old. It's a massive monolith that you're working on, and you can't do anything on it. It's too old now. Like, who uses Java now? No, I mean, majority of the organizations, like companies, have moved away from Java now. So if you're still using Java, I mean, for backend you might still use it, but for like, who uses Java for like front end applications anymore?
I mean, I'm of the understanding, maybe someone tied to BNZ can tell me, but there's still a need for COBOL developers.
Are they?
I mean, I don't know. I think banks have a lot of mainframes and stuff still around.
And it's like from what I've heard, again, just from what I've heard, could or could not be true, is it's really hard to hire people for backend, because like the mainframe, they are so old, and not a lot of people want to work on it. People are more interested, like all developers and testers, they're all interested in working on front-end applications and APIs, microservices, and that sort of stuff. I really want a PHP engineer right now, and that's harder to find than if I could just pull a JavaScript person off the shelf. It was hard to find like engineers who know Python as well, because Python was in the it wasn't as famous, right? Like probably 5-6 years ago, but now as more and more organizations and the backends are actually more moving to Python, now you can easily find Python engineers. So I think technical stack is also one of the reasons, and it would be a make and break for me as well. Like if I was happy with the salary and I have enough career growth opportunities, but I'm stuck working on platforms that are like really, really old, can't do like any DevOpsy stuff on it, can't release frequently. And if I have an offer from another company that provides me the same growth opportunities, same salary, then but if they have a brand new technical stack, they're cloud native and all of that stuff, I would probably switch. And I think a lot of my friends would kind of like leave for that as well. Because again, it's kind of like, how much am I investing? Because I'm always thinking about what's going on my resume. So every 6 months I spend at a company, what skills are going on my resume? Am I still doing the same job I was doing 12 months ago, or has that improved? But that's probably, again, just me, because I'm kind of like very hyper focused on growth.
I agree. But it's also never as cut and dry as that.
I know. Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I really feel for organizations that, like maybe, they're not, a high profile organization. Maybe they're like a sub government department somewhere, or, some, just something that's really sort of unsexy, right? Who need amazing work done but aren't attractive to employees. And then the problem is that then the way that the only thing that then they can compete on is price. It's like, well, if you want to attract them, then you're going to have to pay them more. And yet these are the very same organizations that might not have the same amount of money.
But
I've got absolutely no solution for this, but it's like, it's such a quandary.
Yeah, that's it. Like from what I've heard, a lot of ministries right now over here are paying more than what a lot of banks are paying or what startups and scale-ups can pay. But they still use very old technical stack. And it's mostly because people usually don't want to work there. So they have to, like, even for the contracting rates, they have to up it by like $5 or $10 per hour, which then makes it quite attractive for people to kind of like leave their current job and move over there. Another thing that I wanted to bring in, Aaron, do you want to say something?
Oh, no, it was going to be a question, like if another topic I was going to sort of ask, maybe we can come back to it or we could decide to leave it, was, way back at the beginning, we talked about people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Yes. And I want to get your perspective on, what a good man, or what is the kind of manager that would make the decision to leave an organization really difficult? But maybe that's kind of like the last thing.
That's like a trick question for me and John. That's a really good question. Yeah. That's a really good question. Can you repeat that again? Like that's actually making
so I guess, what kind of manager, what are the qualities of a manager that would make the decision to leave an organization really difficult? Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not leaving the manager.
So you like the manager is so good that you don't want to leave the organization, right?
Basically, I mean, it's another way of asking, so what are the qualities of a good manager? But it's kind of like, what are the qualities of a manager that would make the decision to leave a difficult decision?
Yeah. I actually, so the topic that I was going to switch over to was kind of like similar, which was, I think it ties back into this as well. But like we should, let's unpack this one first. So for me personally, if I am in a permanent position, feedback, constant feedback, constant one-on-ones, even if it's like monthly catch-ups, and my manager being fully aware of how I am tracking with my 6-monthly goal or my 3 quarterly goal, like constantly having those conversations, and my manager finding opportunities for me. And if that means that I've grown out of my current time and I need to move to a different time or to a totally different domain, then that's their job to kind of like find that right opportunity for me and to encourage me to kind of like move on to those roles. That will be my type. I mean, there's quite a few more things as well, but I think that's a good place to start with. What about you, James?
My best manager gave me frequent and candid feedback and direct, fiercely defended her team to the point where I can clearly remember her chasing another manager out of the room who was giving one of our team a hard time. She was very transparent about what she was working on, what was going on with the organization, and she was an advocate for me to the point where she recommended me for a job outside of her team, which was going to make her life harder, but was ultimately the best thing for me. And that, there's the standard from where I sit.
That last point, I think, is an important one, that, doing things that, not just doing things that make your life as a manager easier,
Yep. Majority of, for like just with my experience, I feel like majority of the middle management, they're kind of like in a position where they always have to say the politically correct thing. And while they have to say the politically correct thing. Whereas my personality is, I would prefer them to be honest and authentic with me and to be vulnerable with me. And James's manager sounds like she was pretty much like, there would be like a gold bar, and there would be gold bar standard, and there would be like a manager that I wouldn't leave, regardless of how shitty everyone else is. Like that is a manager I would stay with, or if they move, I would actually follow them. I would leave for them, which happens so many times, right? A lot of people leave, like one person leaves, and then a lot of other people just follow them. And it's the person, and this is like what people say. it's not the product that sells, it's the people behind the product that sell, right? Like when it comes to like creating a product and entrepreneurship and startup culture, like it's the people that are followed. It's not never the product. Anyways, what are your views, Aaron? What's your do you have any favorite qualities?
Yeah, just thinking back some of my sort of favorite managers, and I think it was like knowing that you have an ally
Yes.
was really important. So knowing that your interests were being represented, at that leadership level, and yeah, someone that you can be vulnerable with, and open with, in terms of, you know what your strengths are, you know what your weaknesses are, and then just being able to be open and talking to your manager about that. And I'm a pretty transparent person as well, and sort of like a jokey person, and so someone that you can kind of joke with and go, hey, like, I don't know, let's say, for example, I'll just use a fictional example, but let's say like I'm a really shy person, then someone I can jump into the room and go, today I spoke to a room full of people, and they'll celebrate that success with you, knowing that for you that was a success.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I like in a manager.
Yeah, but also one of the things that I recently learned from one of my people leads, who I absolutely adore, she creates a safe space with me where I can have all sorts of conversations with her. And I absolutely love that about her. Like if I was to ever move into a role where I had people reporting back to me, like I would create that safe space. And a lot of time creating that safe space means that their conversation never leaves like the two people. So that's really, really important. It's I think as someone who have people reporting to them, I think if you can create that safe space for people where they can open up and tell you like what's going on with their lives, and they know that you're being supported, like you can have those confidential conversations with them. I think like yeah, I would definitely respect that.
So how did they create that safe space?
I think a lot of it goes to empathy, just like having the empathy to be able to understand, put themselves in the person's shoes, right? And I think a lot of times, like when you're going through hard situations, so, someone's pet died, someone's going through a divorce or a separation, or someone's child is sick, or, their roof is leaking and they need like 20 grand that they don't have. And that might be the reason they need to leave the company, because the other company is giving them that money, right? They're getting that by jumping, they get that salary raise. So if managers can create that safe space where employees can feel and have their conversation with them. And a lot of time it just comes back to like being empathetic and kind enough, and like giving the other person the benefit of doubt. Like because these are really, really hard and awkward conversations. And majority of the time, I think people feel that we can't have these conversations with our managers and they just leave. This is one of the things which I absolutely love about my manager. I can absolutely tell her anything, and she creates that safe space for me. Yeah. Before we wrap this up, really quickly, what does office politics looks like? So the reason I'm bringing this up is, so I ran into a colleague at BNZ in the elevator last week, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were here. When did you join? And he was like, oh, I've been here for 6 months. And I was like, so you left that company? And he was like, yeah, away from it was too much politics. Now I'm just like away from the politics. And there was it was quite a rushed conversation, but it's just like when he mentioned the office politics, I was just like, yeah, that was actually one of the reasons why I left that company too. So I was like, it would be good to bring it up. Like, what does office politics looks like? Like, how do you guys define it? Because it is one of the leading reasons why people leave. I mean, a part of it is like ego-driven leadership, like when people are more ego-driven rather than like a servant leadership model. But like what else contributes to like shitty toxic culture that organizations can proactively try to avoid so that employees never leave, like they thrive in those conversations. Like for me, growth mindset over fixed mindset is like when you have too much office politics or a bit of toxic culture going around, people are stuck in like a fixed mindset, like they're quite reluctant and resistant to change, to trying new things.
Yeah, trying to keep this condensed. I think every office has politics. Everyone.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean they're bad.
Yeah.
It's, you may not have visibility to some of that stuff if you're lower down in the IC level.
Yeah.
As you get to be a manager, you see more of that and how those higher level interactions work and that sort of thing. But if office politics is, if the culture is bad, if that does go wrong, then that's a big problem.
Yeah, I'm not good at politics, which is also why I didn't want to become like a test manager. And that
You're too
kind of
honest.
Well, yeah, and also I'm kind of oblivious to a lot of it. And then I'll discover later it's like, oh no, so-and-so saying this. It's like, oh no. And then I think back to a conversation where maybe I've bounded up to them and had a really big positive thing going, I did, and then you realize that they didn't like you and they didn't, it's like, I think it comes down to, when I think back to politics and where it's affected me, I think it's, it's always come down to someone feeling threatened by something or someone and they're doing what they can to mitigate that threat, right?
Yep.
And me too. Like, I'll feel threatened by something. Like maybe there's, like when I think about, say, when I have dabbled in what you might call office politics, it's been because someone is doing something and I feel threatened by it, and so then you kind of go around trying to rally kind of like your allies, right, to say, hey, do you agree with this? No, I don't agree with it either. And then before you know it, I guess you yourself trying to make yourself feel better about something, in terms of this threatening things happened, and then you try and find some friends, some allies. You've actually created some politics. You've created some drama because now you've got a group of people that are like, yeah, this is really bad. Oh, this is terrible. And then, and now you've suddenly created politics because you've created a. Yeah. I'm just reflecting on this now because I haven't really thought about it much.
No, I feel so called out by this, Aaron.
I'm only just thinking about it now. And then in terms of actually identifying that and going, actually, if I don't want to be involved in politics, then what I need to do is not. I guess it's doing things in secret, right? It's doing things where it's like I need to find some group of people that make me feel better about myself.
Yeah.
And hanging out with them and doing things with them, and then the people that I feel threatened by or I don't like so much, then don't do things with them, and you've just now created politics, right?
Yeah, and like for me, I call it you versus them culture. So sorry, like you versus us culture. Like, and I think in some of our earlier episodes we talked about this, where there are several companies where there's the organizational culture, and then all the teams, they are like their own company and they have their own culture, and a lot of times that culture can be toxic. And going back to what you were saying, like that's kind of like instead of uniting people, you are actually creating that separation. It's like you versus me, you versus us, you versus them culture. And I absolutely hate it. And one of the other compelling reasons from like in my top 5, the reason why I have left companies in the past, it's like I love the company, but this particular domain, this particular time, or this particular leader, they just separate people. Like it's just like they are their own company, and I would like, it sucks for me to leave the company, but again, I'm leaving this person, this particular domain. I'm not leaving the entire organization. And Aaron, you actually raised a really good point there, though. Like when you don't like someone, what happens is then you just like you don't hang out with them, and then you do not give them the benefit of doubt, and And if you are forced to be in the same meeting as them, I have noticed like you would dismiss their opinions, and a lot of people do that. I think early in my career, I used to do it as well because that's our default. But again, with self-awareness, constant self-awareness, you can teach yourself to not do it. And I think that's the point of like being a grown-up or being someone with like 10, 15, 20 years of experience in the industry, like you learn to deal with your own issues. You develop that self-awareness and you become comfortable working with everyone, even with people who you don't quite agree with.
Yeah, especially when, in that experience when it's like, cool, I have experience now being wrong so many times. It's like, oh, actually, because at the beginning of your career, I don't know, there's this thing called, if you're sort of arrogant like I am / was, there was this idea that you're right, because, you read the book, you did all the thing, and so now this, after you've been wrong so many times, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Michael Bolton, the tester, he gave me some advice once, and that is, he was like, okay, the voice in your head that's saying you're a dick, to the person. So replace that with, a voice that says they might be right, they might be right, they might be right. And then he said, and then the next step after that is to believe it.
Yes.
So now I actually do. I literally, it is as conscious as that. I will sit in a meeting, and as soon as I have a reaction like, oh no, this person's talking rubbish, it's like, stop, they might be right. And then I totally reframe the conversation to, okay, let's listen to this as if they might actually be right.
Yeah.
And then going, okay. It's like, yeah, Aaron, you might be wrong. You might be wrong. They might be right. It's like, okay. And then, it's been an incredible piece of advice.
Love it.
And it's just so simple. I mean, it sounds obvious, right? What if they're right? But sometimes that doesn't occur to you that they might actually be right, especially if it's someone that you don't like.
Because you don't want them to be.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or if they're right, it's threatening to you. It's like, well, wait a minute, that means that what I'm good at isn't as valuable, or, it's like, oh no, but they might be right. It might be uncomfortable, but what if they're right? Just consider that. And you're not reacting against something that isn't true. Like you're not reacting against them because what they're saying kind of threatens you, and whether it's threatens you in terms of your job security, threatens you in terms of your values, threatens you in terms of just you want to have a pleasant time at work, right?
Yeah.
But like us feeling threatened is kind of like, again, like if I feel threatened, that's my issue, right? Like I try not to project it on the other person. I would kind of like go and introspect. And I think for me, that's what self-awareness is. And I try my hard, because I was also like equally arrogant, and kind of like way more arrogant than I would like to kind of like say. I was early in my career and I was quite dismissive as well. But as I've grown, I've learned not to be the person who is dismissive. And every now and then I run into people who just like dismissive. Like if someone comes to them with an idea, I mean, because of their experience, they would know better. So, but you don't dismiss the other person, like there is a tone, there is a way you, especially if you're in management and leadership roles, and I think that's one of the greatest qualities of good leaders, or good managers. Like, don't like, even if you're giving criticism, like you have to be kind and polite and never be dismissive, because that's an instant turn off. And instead of creating a connection, you've created that barrier and that wall that's going to now take you like 5 more one-on-one catch-ups to get over. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And also, like, if someone's come to you with an idea, and let's just say, just for the sake of argument, just in this hypothetical situation, it's a crappy idea. Let's say it's a stupid idea. Just for the sake of argument, it's a stupid idea. However, the takeaway should be not that, oh God, this person came up with a stupid idea, but this person took the time, they're thinking about their job, they're thinking about how to improve, and they've come up and they've wanted to share it with you. That should be the takeaway, right?
Exactly.
In terms of, okay, cool. So what have we got here? We've got enthusiasm, we've got engagement. So as a leader, I should be asking myself, all right, then how do we harness that? And how do we, point it somewhere else? Not like, oh my God, what a shitty idea, go away. Yeah.
And a lot of times it could mean actually directing their energy to a different initiative, but in a very nice and polite way, because you don't want to shut them down. But there could be another initiative where you can direct all that energy and enthusiasm to. James.
Actually, sorry.
I
was going to say quickly, another piece of advice I got, and it was actually also from Michael Bolton, is let people be wrong.
Yes, exactly.
And it's like, because also sometimes it's like, sure, they're wrong, but so what? And if they're wrong, they'll discover it themselves soon enough.
Learn. That's how we do.
Yeah, and so maybe like let people be wrong, let them go and do something, and you know what? Maybe there's a 0.1% chance that they're right. But if the consequences of being wrong are so small, then let them be wrong.
And that's it, right? Like creating a culture where it's okay to fail. It's absolutely fine to fail. And I think that's what growth mindset brings, right? Like in a fixed mindset, it's just like, oh no, that's a big deal. We can't try it. We can't afford to fail. Or if we do fail, if we don't meet the deadlines, everyone is so disappointed. Like you've actually created a culture of fear. It's just like, oh my gosh, like failure is not an option. And so many people do it so unconsciously and subconsciously. And I think that's what like bad managers are. Anyways.
Yeah. Or bad managers, maybe they what's the word? They project, like they'll be scared of something. And so
Yeah.
then they project it, they let it go down onto their team. They
Exactly.
rather than hanging it onto themselves. It's like,
Exactly.
no, this is a me problem.
Exactly.
It's just like, no, it's going to be now a you problem.
Yeah. James, we didn't give him between me and Aaron. It was
No, that's okay. I'm conscious that we set a target of about 40 minutes, and we're
40 minutes.
just going to double that. Which is a sign that it's been a good conversation, but we should probably sort of wrap things up.
We should wrap this up. Yes, Aaron, thank you so much.
For the sequel.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I sort of came into this conversation thinking, well, I don't know if I have so much to contribute, because it's, but again, once you start talking and you start just uncovering things, it's,
Well, I mean, between three of us, we have like how much? Like 45, 50 years of experience? So,
don't say that.
So,
yes.
Incredible amount of experience of working in engineering teams and leadership teams and in tech, and like so much to add. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's
been fun.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back again in season 2. James, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you, Camy, and thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Yes. Yeah, you're better at that.
And please leave a comment if you're interested, or if you find it entertaining. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks, James, and thanks, Aaron. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, team. See you.